Hi, my name's Phillip Barlow. I'm the 2020 native plant intern here with the Friends of Birmingham Botanical Gardens. Today I'm going to speak to you about the genus Hexastylis, or as it's commonly known, heartleaf ginger. For my summer internship project, I was involved in curating and starting this Hexastylis collection in the Kaul Wildflower Garden. I'm so excited to get into this presentation and show you more about this fascinating plant. I want to give you a bit of background on me and how I got involved with this native plant internship. Since I was very young, I've always enjoyed spending time outside working in my mother's vegetable garden or building raised flower beds and hiking with my dad. I have translated that love for the outdoors and spending time in nature into my college career. At the moment, I am a junior at Mississippi State University, and I'm majoring in horticulture with a focus in fruit and vegetable production. I plan to attend graduate school for horticulture and plant sciences. I was so excited when I was accepted as a native plant intern because I knew it would elevate my plant knowledge, give me applicable job experience, and I would get to spend time outdoors, which is something I love. As the native plant intern, you do not have a whole lot of downtime. I have been working closely with John Mannion, the Kaul Wildflower Garden curator, to maintain the Kaul Wildflower Garden. The curation of the garden basically means weeding, plantings, cleaning out the pond, which is what I'm doing in the photo on the right of your screen here, filling the bog, and countless other things. I have gained a lot of experience from the curation of the Kaul Wildflower Garden, such as landscape design, and a lot of valuable plant knowledge. Due to the current situation with COVID-19, I consider myself incredibly lucky to even have this position at the Botanical Gardens. I am able to learn so much from this internship, and the opportunities I'm receiving from the Friends of Birmingham Botanical Gardens, I would not be able to get anywhere else. This position allows me to implement skills that I have learned from school, such as greenhouse management, lath house management, plant propagation, and plant identification. This is perfect because I can translate things that I understand conceptually into real-world experience. I thought I should explain this photo in the top right. I'm pretending to take a bite out of an air layer. An air layer is an alternative form of propagation to the traditional ground layering. I thought it looked like a piece of candy, so I was pretending to take a bite out of it. We went on some pretty great field trips too. I found that I was learning just as much outside the gardens as I was inside of them. Some of my favorite trips were to the Cahaba Lilies and Keel Mountain Park. Having that time out in the field gave me a wider variety of plants to identify, and it showed me how great Alabama's biodiversity truly is. The moment my Hexastylis project got started was actually my first day at the Friends of Birmingham Botanical Gardens. John Mannion and I took a short tour around the Kaul Wildflower Garden. He was pointing out plants he thought I should learn, like different species of trees, shrubs, and herbaceous ground covers. He pointed out this one small mottle green plant with a heart-shaped leaf. He then brought the strange but fascinating flower to my attention. He told me it produced a stale odor to attract potential pollinators. He also showed me that the roots produced a scent of ginger when they're crushed. I immediately began to gravitate to this plant. I started to recognize it and see it everywhere in the Kaul Wildflower Garden. This little plant piqued my interest, so I began to do as much research as I possibly could in my spare time. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of information readily available on Hexastylis. The lack of information encouraged me to find living specimens to fill in the gaps of information that could not be found online. Hexastylis and why it's important. Importance of a plant is relative. I do not believe plants must have life-saving characteristics or be edible to be important. And honestly, Hexastylis is neither of these. Hexastylis is significant to me because of its species, Hexastylis speciosa. This species is one of 29 endemic plants to Alabama. Endemic plants are unique, as they are only found growing naturally in specific areas. The genus of Hexastylis adds so many colors to a landscape. Greens, purples, whites, and even silvers all come together and make for a very attractive garden. In my opinion, the individualistic nature of this plant adds to the significance of Hexastylis as a genus. The history and uses of Hexastylis. Hexastylis is a part of the Aristolochic, or the birthwort family. In the 1800s, it was named the birthwort family because the fragrant root was believed to accelerate and aid in childbirth. The roots and leaves were dried and used in herbal remedies in the early 1800s for weight loss, heart and lung problems, and even stomach pains. This sounds like a great natural alternative to modern medicine, right? Well, like I said in the previous slide, Hexastylis has no medical or edible characteristics. The common name of Hexastylis is heartleaf ginger. You should not let that name fool you. It is actually quite toxic, so using it in teas or herbal remedies is not a great idea. Hexastylis, and all plants in Aristolochic, contain Aristolochic acid. This acid is a nephrotoxin, meaning it directly affects the kidney functions. Aristolochic acid can cause kidney failure, kidney cancer, and bladder cancer. When Hexastylis was a relevant medical practice back in the 1800s. You also have to think back on their questionable medical practices that they used back then, such as bloodletting, cocaine toothache drops, and Aristolochic herbal remedies. The point I'm trying to make is, these remedies are outdated and dangerous, and you should not consume this plant, even if it smells good and has ginger in the name. Who discovered Hexastylis? Hexastylis was discovered in America by André Michaux, a French botanist who is known for his work in the Northeast United States. In André's early life, he developed a love for Latin and Greek. He also displayed a natural ability for plant propagation and care. He was given the title of the King's Botanist and began his studies in North America from 1785 to 1796. Michaux is also known for his books, The Oaks of North America and the Flora of North America. André Michaux found Hexastylis in South Carolina, and originally named what we know today as Hexastylis, Asarum. It is believed that he found his first specimen of Hexastylis between the late 1780s and the early 1790s. His findings were documented in his book, The Flora of North America, but he sadly died in 1802, a year before it was published in 1803. The nomenclature of Hexastylis can be pretty confusing. Here, I have it broken down in a way that makes it easier to digest. In botanical nomenclature, three very important parts are the family, genus, and species. Hexastylis belongs to the family Aristolochiaceae. This family also contains Aristolochia and Asarum. These three genera can be found natively in North America. The genus Hexastylis has 11 native species, making it more diverse than Asarum, which only contains 6. This photo on the right of your screen shows in-depth nomenclature of Hexastylis or heartleaf ginger. It goes from kingdom all the way down to species. Like I was just saying, the nomenclature of Hexastylis is very confusing and hard to pin down. For many years it's been hazy due to the constant name changes between Hexastylis and Asarum. The botanist who discovered Hexastylis, André Michaux, originally named this plant Asarum. So the nomenclature for Hexastylis has constantly been changing, since it was discovered, all the way to the early 2000s. To add even more confusion, some people use Hexastylis as a synonym for Asarum, and in the past, Hexastylis was briefly recognized as a subgenus to Asarum. Are you confused yet? Because I know I was when I was doing all this research. To break it down, Hexastylis and Asarum are considered two completely different genera. I believe this to be the correct form of classification, due to the different identification features between the two genera. In the two photos on the right, I'm demonstrating how confusing it would be if Hexastylis and Asarum were continued to use as synonyms for each other. It's just unnecessary to have two names for the same plant. In this slide, I want to compare Hexastylis and Asarum to show that the current classification is correct in segregating the two genera. The first difference in Hexastylis and Asarum are the leaves. The leaves of the Hexastylis are evergreen and glabrous, while the leaves of Asarum are deciduous and pubescent. The leaves of Asarum also grow in pairs, and the leaves of Hexastylis grow alone. And finally, a key identifying feature of Hexastylis is the flower. The flower of Hexastylis forms a calyx tube, and the sepals are not prominent, while the sepals are prominent and the flower does not form a calyx tube for Asarum. The leaf structure of Hexastylis is thick, waxy, and glabrous. It is also entire and evergreen. The color of the leaves can have a wide range of varieties. This is a large part of the plant's aesthetic. The color can differ based on sunlight, soil pH, and available nutrients. These three photos are showing the variety of color within the same species of Hexastylis. The flora and growth habit of Hexastylis. The flowers of Hexastylis are typically covered by the foliage, and can even be partially buried in the soil. The flowers are incredibly different from species to species in Hexastylis. They come in all sorts of colors, shapes, and sizes. This makes the flower a very important identifying feature. Inside the flower, the stigma and style are very separated. Even though this flower is technically capable of self-pollination, it is still beneficial for this plant to have a pollinator. The roots and rhizomes of Hexastylis. Hexastylis has stout, rope-like roots. This feature allows them to anchor into rocky hillsides and rough terrain. As the rhizome crawls and expands underground, this allows the plant to produce new growth from its rhizome structures. Depending on the species of Hexastylis, some leaves can grow scattered along the rhizome, while some are clustered at the apex of the rhizome. This is a good way to determine the different species of Hexastylis. Where you can find this plant naturally. Hexastylis is native to the southeastern United States, but it can also be found as far north as New York State. In North America alone, there are 11 different species of Hexastylis, with 5 of them being native to Alabama. One thing that makes Alabama so special is the incredible biodiversity of this state. Because Alabama has great biodiversity, we're lucky enough to have an endemic Hexastylis. The species of that plant is Hexastylis speciosa. In this slide, I want to show you the difference in foliage of our Alabama native Hexastylis. Our first native Hexastylis is Hexastylis erifolia. This is one of the most distinct leaves due to how angular it is. Then we have Hexastylis harperi. Hexastylis harperi is actually one of my favorites because of how small the leaves are compared to the flowers. Next, we have Hexastylis heterophylla. Number 4, we have Hexastylis shuttleworthii. I really like this particular species because the silver, whites, and greens it has to offer. And finally, our Alabama Endemic, Hexastylis speciosa. I really enjoy the shiny green leaves with slight mottling, and the flowers at the bottom of this photo resemble suns on a black background. After showing you the foliage of our native Hexastylis, I want to show you how to identify them. For our first one, Hexastylis erifolia. Because Hexastylis erifolia has such distinct leaves and flowers, it makes it easier to differentiate between the rest of them. But more specifically, the best identifying feature of Hexastylis erifolia is the calyx tube. It's 20 to 25 millimeters long. For Hexastylis harperi, the leaves are scattered along the rhizome. These leaves tend to be separated and far apart. The best identifying feature for Hexastylis heterophylla, the width of the calyx is almost equal to the length of the calyx tube. And finally, for Hexastylis shuttleworthii, the leaves of this plant tend to be clustered at the tip of the rhizome. unlike Hexastylis harperi where the leaves are scattered along the rhizome. You might have noticed on that last slide that we were missing Hexastylis speciosa. Well, I wanted to give this one its own slide so I could go more in depth on our very special Alabama Endemic Hexastylis. This particular species is found naturally growing in Alabama, making it an Alabama endemic. It's only found naturally in Autauga, Chilton, and Elmore counties. The leaves are dark green and will produce a scent of ginger if they're crushed. The flowers are very large considering the size of the plant. They have 3 lobes and they can range from pink to purple in color. And finally, the fruit of Hexastylis speciosa is a fleshy capsule. This capsule contains the seeds of this plant. Hexastylis unfortunately lacks showy flowers, but it still has its own way of attracting pollinators. The pollinators of this plant are unlikely insects, such as gnats, beetles, and flies. Pollination typically occurs in late winter to early spring. After the insect enters the flower, it disrupts the pollen by moving around inside, thus moving the pollen from anther to stigma. Because this flower is capable of self-pollination with a little help from insects, pollination typically occurs within the same flower, so there's little chance for genetic crossing or sharing of genes. The method of seed dispersal for Hexastylis is called myrmecochory. Myrmecochory is a pretty interesting way of seed dispersal. In Greek, the word means circular dance, but in the botanical world, it refers to the dispersal of seeds through ants. On the seed of Hexastylis, it has an elaiosome. This elaiosome is rich in lipids and can act as a food source for the ant. The ant transports the seed back to its nest. It then eats the elaiosome and discards of the seed, where hopefully the seed can germinate successfully into a new plant. On this slide, I want to show you the different propagation methods that can be used to help you grow Hexastylis. There are 3 main methods. It can be grown from seeds, cuttings, or division. Seeds should be sown as soon as possible and kept outside. Growth will begin the next spring. Cuttings can be taken with a section of rhizome, and they will start rooting in about 6 weeks. The division process of Hexastylis is relatively simple. It involves only cutting the cluster of Hexastylis in half, and then planting the separate halves. You can use Hexastylis in many different landscapes. It's a very hardy plant, but it will do the best in partial shade, under thick canopies, and damp soil. This plant makes for a charming ground cover among stones and tree roots. The green and white mottling on the leaf catches your eye like a flower would. This particular plant looks great on hillsides, so its foliage can cascade down the hill and over stones. Another thing to think about when you're planting Hexastylis is what to plant it with. Planting Hexastylis with other ground covers can be very complementary. Some examples are partridge berry, bloodroot, and even Canadian wild ginger. On the other hand, planting amongst mossy stones and buttressing roots will give Hexastylis a cascading effect. Even though mountain mint and Solomon seal require a lot of sun, Hexastylis can do well on the forest edge, where it will receive a little more sunlight. Tucking Hexastylis underneath the mountain mint and Solomon seal will give you a great combination. My master plan for the Hexastylis collection and the Kaul Wildflower Garden, I decided to incorporate moss-covered stones and partridge berry to partner the Hexastylis. I wanted the Heartleaf ginger to be the main attraction, so I chose partridge berry and moss to not overwhelm it. The partridge berry has small white flowers and red berries. I thought this would add just enough color to grab people's attention and get them interested in the Heartleaf ginger. The mossy stones add a completely different texture to the hillside. I believe all the different components in this collection tie it all together and give it more dimension. This photo is supposed to show you what the area looked like before I started preparing it for the collection. First, I started clearing the hillside of all its weeds and underbrush. I then noticed that there are large stones in the side of the hill, and this would hinder my planting process. So I then removed the larger stones and placed them to the side to incorporate later in this garden. The removal of the stones and clearing of weeds was hard work, but mentally, this was the easiest part of my design. Next, it was time to find Hexastylis to actually put in this collection. So I started to search the Kaul Wildflower Garden, looking for new and interesting species of Hexastylis. Then I began to identify the different species in this collection. We have documented 4 different species of Hexastylis and about 5 different varieties in our collection. This is a great amount of plants to show people the difference and variety in this particular genus. After initially removing the stones, I started to notice that there was a movement of soil off the hillside. To slow down erosion, I started to wedge the stones back into the side of the hill. I arranged the rocks to leave pockets of soil for plantings of Hexastylis and partridgeberry. Next, I placed moss on and around the stones to give them a softer and more aged look. In this photo, you can tell that I've completely cleared and weeded the bed. You can also see that I'm preparing to place the stone and plant Hexastylis. In the pockets of soil between the stones, I began to plant Hexastylis and partridgeberry. I covered the bare portions of soil with partridgeberry because it's a sprawling ground cover and it would reduce erosion. Both of these plants are very hardy and got over transplant shock quickly. To reduce any damage that might have come with transplanting, I watered these plants well every day. This slide shows the final product of my Hexastylis collection. I am very proud of the way it all came together. This demonstrates that plants do not need showy flowers to catch your eye. We also produced a QR code sign to add another aspect to this collection. So if you go to the Kaul Wildflower Garden and scan the QR code, you can hear me give a brief description about the collection and what you're looking at. Today we've covered a lot of information very quickly, and I wanted to use this slide to recap. Hexastylis is a multi-purpose plant with the ability to live in harsh conditions. It has evergreen leaves and produces an odor to attract insects to pollinate them. The fragrant roots and rhizomes smell like ginger when they're crushed. Hexastylis and Asarum are not the same genus. And finally, never ingest any part of Hexastylis or any plant in the birthwort family. They're incredibly toxic, so please do not eat them even if it smells good and has ginger in the name. On this slide, I wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you to a couple of people. Thank you to Hugh and Bobby Kaul. Without you two, we would not have the best garden at the Friends of Birmingham Botanical Gardens. A big thank you to the Friends of Birmingham Botanical Gardens, members, donors, volunteers, and staff. I could not have done it without you. Thank you to the Friends of Birmingham Botanical Gardens Junior Board. We could not have made this internship happen without them. A huge thank you to Louise and Josh Billings for opening up their home to me and housing me throughout this internship. I cannot say thank you enough to those two. A special thank you to John Mannion for spending time with me out in the Kaul Wildflower Garden and teaching me so much about plants. A big thank you to Jane Underwood for always having my back and bringing me those popsicles on those hot days working in the gardens. Thank you to Jeff Margreiter, the 2019 native plant intern, for all the help out in the Kaul Wildflower Garden. Finally, thank you to my mom and dad for always pushing me to do better and always believing in me. Here's my contact information if you have any questions about my presentation. feel free to email me. I really hope you enjoyed the presentation on Hexastylis and our Hexastylis collection in the Kaul Wildflower Garden. Thank you so much for watching. It means so much to me.